I think it is right now is an amazing time for network-driven operations, network-driven workflows, um, in large part because the kind of wave of social media has crested and has produced this giant sea of relationship data, of social graph data, right? So all of the people that work for your company and your partners and all of those people have spent the last, decade in some cases or longer, or if maybe they're younger workers, the last 3, 4, 5 years, building out this rich database of everybody that they know. um, why would you not want to use that, right, in your hiring process, in your investment management process, in your sales process, in your biz dev process, but even in your like professional development process, right? In looking for collaborators, in your marketing process, like looking for folks to tie into your brand narrative or for event opportunities. There's just no really part of your business where this idea of tapping into the broader network is invaluable. A lot of folks think of Quorum1 as a consultancy, and I suppose we are that, but really we're like an entrepreneurship collective, kind of like a startup factory or an innovation studio, but one where everything is cooperatively owned and managed by all the members. So it's companies will hire us as consultants, particularly around areas of emerging technologies like AI, data engineering, stuff like that, or like working with business systems like Salesforce, Slack, tons of other different systems. They'll also hire us as like a product studio to help them kind of launch new initiatives or get new products off the ground. And then on the entrepreneurship side, entrepreneurial folks will come in, like service-based entrepreneurs will come in with kind of experimental solution offerings around emerging technologies, and then product-based entrepreneurs will come in with startup ideas, and then Quorum just gives all the kind of resources needed to help folks get from 0 to 1 to 2 faster than they could on their own. We are a network, but we're not a sort of like grow as fast as we possibly can. For us, size is not the primary goal. In fact, up until very recently, like we had a lot of sort of limitations on how folks joined. Just recently, we've opened it up so kind of anybody who wants to join can. But we've always been really focused on like a KPI for us is trust relationships, and so Quorum is really all about getting folks into into the network and then helping them form trust relationships with other folks as fast as possible. And for us, our kind of bedrock belief is that ultimately, in the working world, the way that you form trust relationships with people is by working with them on projects, like side by side. And ultimately, that's kind of always a goal, whether, is to get people in and get them onto projects, whether it's, consulting work or working on a startup or kind of more learning focused projects, research projects, passion projects. It really doesn't matter. The idea is like, you get folks together, put them on a project, have them work together for a while. Coming out the other side of that project, they're going to know a lot more about each other, and they're, even if the project doesn't go well, they're going to have a level of trust in what each other's skill levels are, and that you didn't have before. And so that's kind of like our entire network is built around that idea of a trust engine through peer-based collaboration. One of our favorite clients, they're called Aurora Solar. They're like a unicorn in a software as a service space, but specifically in the renewables industry. Great company, great products. We love working with them. We collaborated with them like over the course of a year on this massive project to kind of completely reorganize the way that they packaged and sold their product, to move towards a kind of usage-based pricing model. And we partnered with them really closely on this, helped them sort of re-architect a bunch of their systems, their financial system, their their CRM, their customer success system, to map those data flows. And as part of that, like we had the core people that were running that. Obviously, we're working really closely with their folks as well. But then we had to kind of go and pull in all of these kind of like fresh people or people that were already in the network or like were kind of one layer out, and we ended up pulling in like former employees of the SaaS platform that they were using to run their finances, and actually some like former kind of in-house consultants for the customer success platform that they were using to run the customer success, and then combining that with like subject matter experts in credit-based pricing models. And so it's sort of this, you have this project, you have a real life use case, and then all of a sudden it's really easy to kind of source in everything that you need. What I'd say is like the further I've gone on in my career, the more I've realized that my network is my career. Um, they're not separate things. Like it's just that's all you have. It, you know, I realized like fairly early on that particularly in professional circles, um, really your reputation and the trust that you built with people over time is like your primary asset. And I think early on I didn't quite realize. I don't think I took like my network very seriously when I was younger. It was all kind of haphazard. Um, but looking back, um, it, really every single facet of my career built on the relationships that I built along the way. There was this like the first startup that I ever worked at. It was a cool company called Granicus. They did like streaming media for government. They're actually still around. They've gone through a couple of acquisition cycles and stuff like that. And actually, like to this day, that was back in 2007 that I started working there. Built an amazing network of just these kind of young 20-something folks. We're all kind of similar stages of our career. And to this day, like a bunch of those folks are the same folks who helped start Quorum, and and all of these other folks have kind of flowed in through that network. The one advice that I actually received from like a kind of seasoned veteran in the startup space when I first moved to San Francisco in 2005, which I adopted and would have passed on to anyone, is basically just like don't burn bridges. The one thing that you want to do is just make sure every relationship that you walk away from, every professional relationship, do your best to just leave in a really good way. You want referenceable like colleagues, referenceable clients. It's really just like appreciating the compound interest of putting efforts into network building. I think when I was, I don't know, 25, I probably I thought of networking, I think, as kind of a cheesy thing. You go to conferences and try to like swap business cards or something, and it felt so inauthentic that I shied away from it for a really long time. But what I realize now is that it's really about human connection, um, and trust. And you have to be able to, if you could find a way to do it authentically, that's coming from like curiosity, that's always the best. So I think one of the things I'd say back to my 20 some odd year old self would be just to find that intrinsic curiosity about other people, about their jobs, about their careers, about like what's going well for them, about what's not going well for them, and just like lean into that. And it doesn't have to be networking shouldn't be transactional. It shouldn't be like it shouldn't feel cheesy. It shouldn't feel inauthentic. If you're doing it that way, then you're doing it wrong. And so I think just anything that you could do to give yourself the opportunity to connect with other folks, even going like to like local, like, game nights, or just going to meetups, even on things that aren't directly related to your industry, just giving yourself an opportunity to connect with other professionals, even if they aren't like, again, right in, in something that we're like, oh, I can see exactly the straight path from here to there, how I'm going to, monetize this relationship down the line. Even if that's not the case, it really is kind of just a numbers game of forming relationships, and getting to know and getting to like a bunch of other folks. And then when done right, I think networking can breed a really like a powerful empathy. And I think one of the greatest superpowers that professionals of all stripes can have is empathy, a deep empathy, caring about other people and the problems that they face. When you need introductions, I mean, we all need introductions sometimes. You're trying to get into an account, trying to close a deal, or There's just maybe trying to create some pressure, expand your footprint within a particular company. Um, I think uh, I a few different types of intros. Like it really depends on your relationship with the person, right? So my strategy is always, there's folks on your team, there's folks that you know really well, but that aren't on your team, and then of course there's folks that are kind of more casual contacts or acquaintances, and your strategy is going to be different for any of those three. Asking for intros, obviously. I think regardless of them, I always really push to try to get people to um, vet with the person being introduced to beforehand without you. A lot of folks will go straight to, they call it the double opt-in. Huge fan of double opt-in. I just like, some folks will particularly if you're asking for an intro from somebody who maybe doesn't give a lot of intros, a lot of times they'll just sort of like put you on an email thread, all three of you or whatever, and say, hey, this person. In certain rare cases I think that's fine, but I always really try and like encourage folks to encourage their their folks that they're asking for intros from to reach out first and just get their permission. You're going to get a much warmer response if you do that double opt-in. You know, and and then it's always good to just give some intro text that they can copy and paste into the thing. But I think that's the basic. Is just whenever I'm trying to help people like make intros or request intros when they're not used to it. A lot of it is just focused on it's like streamlining the experience for like put yourself in that person's shoes and just say, all right, what would make this, like, give them something to copy and paste, right? Make this as easy to say yes to as possible. So yeah, I know. I think that's the basics. Like one of my old sales directors and longtime mentor uh, kind of tried to instill this in me, and I never got that good at it. I've gotten better at it over the years, but just this idea of just like keeping your network warm and always trying to make sure that you're staying in touch with folks, basically. And particularly, like, I probably, this is another thing I would have told my 20-year-old self, is to be a little bit more strategic and like kind of think forward, like, oh, when you're 30, when you're 35, when you're 40, whatever, like, what type of people do you want to have really strong relationships with, right? And then have some idea of like, where are the gaps. Have some idea of like, who are the people that a spreadsheet somewhere of like, hey, who are the people that you met you haven't quite broken through into that, into the friend zone, or into at least the more like closer acquaintance zone with, and trying to just remember to keep reaching out, just asking how folks are doing before you need something. For the love of all that is good and holy, before keep those relationships alive by reaching out when you don't need anything from people. That's the key thing. I think the Swarm is an amazing tool for network-driven organizations, but really like for any organization where building relationships with new folks is a priority, which is not all organizations, but most of them. I suppose if you're deep in some sort of research and development lab, maybe that's not you. But for everybody else, um, I I think you need tools to help you uh, connect, deepen, expand the network. I like to think of the kind of one level, the first level network of a company as the social sphere of a company. And think like, how big is your social sphere? If you have 100 employees and maybe another 200 client partner users, another I don't know, 500 kind of like ex-employees, contractors, whatever. Uh, so maybe small company. Then you multiply that by 10, by 20. That's the size of your social sphere, right? Like, that's the people, because everybody has in their network 10 to 20 people that they could get to kind of do anything for them, right? Where that trust is really really strong. um, and so yeah, if you've got like 500 folks in your core sphere, right? Then you probably have 5,000 in that extended sphere. If you have 5,000 in your core sphere, you probably have 50,000 in that extended sphere. And so I think What the swarm allows you to do is to think of your extended social sphere as an organization, and I think really big about that, and start to incorporate that into all of the different parts of your workflows where uh, building new relationships and finding new folks to work with or coordinate with is important. And the swarm really helps kind of streamline that, and it makes that possible in a way that really nothing else can. Well, Quorum is a particularly network driven organization. Like we are a network. Our whole you know all of our superpowers are really around being able to rapidly pull folks in from our extended network, and place them on, say, paid consulting projects, or staff them up on like an expert roundtable that we're putting together to analyze a particularly tricky business problem for a client or for one of our startups that we're incubating. And so being able to have kind of like lots of people on tap. Who do we know that we trust that is an expert in like large language models in healthcare? Who do we know who has studied up on the Apple Vision Pro API, right? And so a lot of times we have an internal data structure where we can kind of like source those people internally, but or like for the people who are already super engaged. But we figured out we're a 200 member network, and already not everybody has set up their swarm, and already our swarm is almost 50,000. And so that's 50,000 profiles that we can search. And so in any of those cases, once the moment that we figured out that we don't have the right person in kind of the zero level network, or even if we know we kind of do, then kind of the next step is, all right, let's start doing a couple of searches in our swarm, pull those folks together, start looking at candidates, and then asking around, looking at people's kind of like little trust scores, and trying to figure out who goes on the short list of who we might invite to a particular opportunity. As organizations really lean into thinking of themselves as not just like a company with employees and then everybody who's not employees, right? This very like black and white type of distinction. I think one of the things that tools like the Swarm encourage organizations of all types to do is to not think of them as just these like binary in or out type groups, but actually as this infinitely interconnected network that extends far beyond the sort of the the work, the office walls, or the group of people who's currently under an active employment agreement, right? You think of all of those folks that you're connected to that are aware of your brand, and just it's a kind of a gradiated. It's less of a black or white in or out, and more of a grayscale. And so I think one of the things that Quorum in particular, and a bunch of the folks in kind of our future of work think tank encourage organizations to do is to really just think about how they manage hiring, how they even structure their teams in general in this new world. Does everything have to be so black or white? What does it look like? Not just to like partner with consultancies and to sort of co-build with external resources, but what does it look like to give more early stage employment opportunities via apprenticeships, via internships, via kind of work to hire models, via experimental side projects. And so I think tools like the Swarm, these enable you to really think of your organization in a more network centric way, and that creates the possibility to think about everything that you do in a more network centric way. And ultimately, there's a huge opportunity to be more capital efficient, getting more done for less, by kind of like crowdsourcing things within the network of your clients, within the network of your potential future employees, even within your network of your ex-employees, or just like your brand, followers, right? But also to create more opportunity, and to bring more diverse perspectives into some of the project work that you're doing as an organization.